Welcome back. Well, today we are going to talk about feedback on eBay. And the reason we're going to talk about this is because in the weeks to come, we're going to take a look at selling on eBay. And some of you have had some questions, sort of pre-selling questions. And feedback was one of them. And a couple of viewers had written in and said, do I need feedback in order to sell on eBay? Can I just open an account and with no feedback start selling? Well, the short answer is yes. So we're going to get into that when we come back. Well, as it happens, I just made a purchase from a seller on eBay, and the seller had zero feedback, none. Now, it didn't dissuade me at all. In fact, I find that when I make purchases from sellers who have very little feedback, under 20 or 30, they usually take very good care of me as a customer because they're new to this. I'm one of their first sales, and they want to make sure everything goes smoothly. Is there a danger in this? Well, of course. There are fly-by-night sellers. There's always the danger that the seller, however well-meaning, won't have a clue what they're doing, and you're never going to get your stuff, not because they're trying to defraud you, but because they just really haven't thought it through carefully enough and don't know how to get the stuff to you. It's always a risk. But is it enough to turn me off the process? No. I bought china from this seller, a lot of lusterware, frankly, things that I want for Tidbit trays and whatnot. And so I purchased it. The seller got in touch with me shortly after the sale and said, I'm still figuring out how to box this up. And it was very good of them to do that because I understand that as a new seller, and this is China, this is not going to be easy. I would be concerned about shipping this. And I've been selling online for 20 years. So I'm glad they were straightforward about it. I'm glad they let me know there might be a slight delay in the shipping. Not much of a delay. And I'm certainly not going to hold that against them because they let me know and I understand the problem. So when I look at their feedback, and that's what this is all about, feedback. When I look at their feedback, when I'm going to give them feedback, I'm going to make sure that I take that into consideration, that it was a new seller and they might have been a little confused, but they kept me in the loop, which is very good communication. And also, because they kept me in the loop, so if shipping's a day or two late, I'm not going to hold that against them because I know what's going on. So the fact that they had no feedback is not a deterrent, but it is for some people. So I thought we would start off by talking about the ways in which you can get a little bit of feedback if you just opened your eBay account like last week or something. And I wanted to show you this. You see that? All right, let me turn it on. Let's see if it will. Can you see that light flashing? All right, I got another one here. This one flashes in color. It might be a little easier to see. Well, yes, when a photobomb kitty goes out of the house in the morning, which he does before dawn every day, I stop him at the door and snap one of these on his collar because I love him and I want him to come home. And I get these on eBay. and I buy them all the time, and I buy batteries for them, and they are somewhere between $1 and $1.50. I have two in my hand right now. When I go out walking, I snap them on the pockets of my sweatshirt and the hood and whatever, and believe me, I look like a Christmas tree because I too walk before dawn. It's just safe. Actually, I don't look like a Christmas tree. A jogger stopped me one morning very early and said, I saw you from about a half a mile away, and I really thought it was a cruiser pulling somebody over. And I thought to myself, that's not so bad, because when traffic is coming, if they think I look like a police car, they're going to slow down. So I like these little things. So what does this have to do with feedback? Well, I buy them for $1 to $1.50 from sellers from Asia. Almost all of these come from China or Thailand. The sellers are just mega sellers. Their feedback is in the tens of thousands. And when I buy one of these for $1 or $1.50, by the way, that includes shipping, they immediately and automatically leave feedback for me. Every one of these I buy because I will buy one from one seller and I'll buy another from another seller, and every one of these is a piece of feedback. And it's a little light for my cat collar and my own collar. So there are so many easy ways to acquire a few bits of feedback. Remember, feedback, you do not need 1,000 feedbacks in order to be considered a respectable seller on eBay. Anything 20, 30 is going to convince most people that you have experience. And if that's what you want to do, buying things, not necessarily this is just an example. Buying little trinkets on eBay is one of the easiest ways to do it. Now, you can also get feedback by going to, and there are sites on eBay, in effect, what they sell is feedback. They sell little digital downloads that are very inexpensive. They are a few cents each. And it's a little digital download of a picture or whatever. But the point is not the little digital download. It's the fact that you pay them 5 cents, 10 cents, whatever, and it really is very low priced items. You pay them the money and they automatically give you feedback. And they say that in their listings. All sales result in feedback because, in effect, that's what they're selling. Feedback, not the little download items. I am not recommending that you do that. Frankly, although there's nothing inherently dishonest about it, it's just one of those things that doesn't feel quite kosher to me. But I wanted you to be aware of the fact that it is out there. So, you're all grown-ups, you make up your own mind. It's a way to get a decent amount of feedback fairly inexpensively. But keep in mind that feedback is restricted because eBay doesn't like that. So they made sure that a seller could not leave buyer feedback or vice versa. I think it's like one transaction a week, so you'd have to find a lot of these little folks to do it. But if you want a few bits of feedback, if it give you more of a sense of security starting out, then by all means, look for the little trinkets, things you would buy ordinarily. I love these things. I am absolutely convinced that they are responsible for keeping me safe on the street, and who knows, they probably saved my little kitty's life. I wish I could keep him in, but I can't. Well, we talk about it, and it just goes in one of his ears and out the other. I get nowhere with him. So little things like this. Other little things that I've gotten from eBay are like little air freshener pellets, things like that. Things that I would buy anyway, a lot of them I just buy on eBay. Sewing notions is a big one. If I want a yard of ribbon, I go on eBay. I will get a yard of ribbon or a yard of lace for $1 or so from Asia. It gets sent over. They always send feedback for the sale. Now I buy it because I want the ribbon or the lace or whatever, and because I find it a lot easier to do it online than have to choose from whatever is available in my local fabric store, which is small and the selections are limited. Little craft supplies like that. There are ways for you to legitimately get yourself some feedback, even if you're just starting out. So having said that, let's just take a look at feedback in general. If you go on eBay as a buyer, you get to leave feedback for the seller from whom you've made the purchase. So you go on, you buy something from me. When you get it, and hopefully you wait to get it before you leave the feedback. Not everybody does, but you have an opportunity to rate the transaction as positive, negative, or neutral. Well, almost from the outset, beginning of the whole feedback system, neutral became considered negative. The only thing that really counted as far as the seller was concerned was positive feedback. Now that is the only thing that eBay counts in a very literal sense. If someone has 100% feedback, they're counting the volume of positive feedback. Neutral feedback does not count against you. Negative feedback does. So neutral doesn't increase or decrease your feedback score. But if you have 10 sales and 9 of them are positive, 1 of them is neutral, your feedback is 100%. If you have 10 sales, 9 of them are positive, 1 of them is negative, your feedback is 90%. That negative, that one sale, which is 10% of your overall sale, is held against you as a negative. So that's how you got the 90. A seller with a 90% positive, unless it really is only 5 or 10 sales, a seller with 90% positive is going to make people stop and think, because when you're dealing with somebody on eBay, you want to look at the feedback and you want it to be in the high 90s. You should always make sure you allow room for someone who had a misunderstanding with a buyer, but you're looking for 97, 98, 99%. That's and obviously 100. That's what you're looking for. So people try to avoid getting negative feedback. There was a time when both buyer and seller could leave positive, negative, and neutral feedback for one another. But what ended up happening very quickly was, if a buyer had an unpleasant experience with a seller and left negative feedback, the seller would turn around and leave what is called retaliatory feedback for the buyer. They usually started off with worst buyer ever. That's generally how you can tell retaliatory feedback. And buyers complained about that. They went to eBay and said, why would I even bother leaving feedback when I know that the seller will just turn around and leave me lousy feedback in return when I haven't done anything? I'm just giving you my honest opinion about the transaction. So the way it works now is a seller can only leave positive feedback for the buyer. Not neutral, not negative. Used to be able to do it, can't do it anymore. And you cannot leave positive feedback by hitting that green button, but putting a negative comment in there. eBay will remove that. So it has to be purely positive feedback. The only recourse you have as a seller, if the buyer has been unsatisfactory, is to leave no feedback at all. I guess it's better than giving them positive when you really had a very hard time with the sale. But it's policies like this that undercut the validity of the whole feedback process. There are other things that undercut the validity. For example, if I buy something from you, you have my name and you have my address because you mailed me the item. So if I leave negative feedback for you as a seller, I have to be pretty gosh darn sure that you're not the kind of sociopath that's going to track me down and decide to settle that score in person. And I have heard stories about things like that. So I'm not trying to scare you, I'm just putting it out there. I have heard stories about that. Nothing like that has ever happened to me, although frankly, I do not give eBay my phone number. I give them a fake phone number because what I got, it's been a long time, but of course, I wouldn't know if I were getting calls because remember, I'm giving a fake phone number. But when I was selling Barbies, I would say about every 2 months, I would get a call because they could get my phone number from eBay. I would get a call from some very disturbed or very drunk gentleman who wanted to know what color underwear my Barbies were wearing. And within about 30 seconds of the conversation, he was moving into what color underwear I was wearing, and So I do not leave my phone number because I found that personally to be asking for trouble. They can have my name and address because they'd have to be pretty crazy to want to have it out with me in person. But I was getting obscene phone calls from people who got my number from eBay. So my suggestion to you is please do not give them your real phone number. You are begging for trouble. There are some very crazy people out there, and I think it's best not to give them the opportunity to express their dysfunction. So, back to feedback. The problems with the system, as you can see, is if you cannot leave accurate feedback for your buyer, as a seller, it doesn't make much sense to leave feedback at all. If you are a buyer and the seller has absolutely no recourse to come against you, you can say whatever you want about the transaction. Now, I personally do not believe that happens very often, that a buyer just gets cranky and tanks a seller's feedback for no reason at all. I have known people who have claimed it's happened to them. I'm not willing to discount it. But all of this just boils down to, do not think that feedback is the end-all be-all. There are many, many reasons that people might leave inaccurate feedback. These days, many, many reasons people might leave inaccurate feedback on the positive side. They might say a transaction went better than it actually did. They might do that because they are a seller and they don't have the opportunity to say it didn't go well. They might do that because they are a buyer and they know the seller has their personal information, their name, their address, and they might think, gee, I don't think I want to say anything bad even though I was dissatisfied with the sale. So just keep that in mind. Feedback is an indication, but it's not necessarily reflecting 100% of what's going on. I look at my eBay account and I say, well, I would estimate that about 25% of my transactions resulted in feedback. It's just the way it is. Not everybody leaves feedback. So you look at that, are you getting an overall picture? No, not really. You're getting 25% of it. Are you getting a fair picture? Well, I think you are. But still, it's a fraction of the business I've actually done online shows up in the feedback. So let's talk about the other structure that eBay brought into the feedback system. And this came in about the time that they removed the seller's ability to leave negative feedback for the buyer. And this was the DSR system, Detailed Seller Rating. Those are the stars. And they have 4 categories. The item description, was it accurately described? The communication, did the seller communicate well? The shipping time, how quickly did they ship? And the shipping cost, how reasonable was it? So when you start to look at this and you start to see how the stars are lining up, this is another one that you have to be skeptical when you look at it, because very early on in this process too, 5 stars in every category became the default. If a seller ships out with free shipping, eBay automatically gives them 5 stars on shipping. If the seller ships out within whatever random time frame they decide is appropriate, eBay will give them 5 stars. You might not feel that's 5-star shipping. You might feel if somebody takes 3 days to put something in the mail, maybe that's something you would only give 4 days. eBay will do that for you. eBay gives 5 stars in communication. I don't know why, even if there's been no communication whatsoever, eBay will sometimes do that. Just about the only category in which you as a buyer will be able to give your accurate opinion without eBay coming in and automatically putting in stars is the item description. How accurate is it? So that means that whatever was going on with these little stars, for some reason eBay goes in and fills in the blanks themselves, and they do this a lot of the time. And I know for me as a buyer, there have been times when I will look at how eBay has filled in the automatic ratings, and I've just said I'm not leaving feedback at all because I feel this is deceptive. I do not feel that the communication was good, or I do not feel that the shipping time deserved 5 stars. So it's one of the other factors you need to take into consideration. When you are looking at a seller that has 5 stars in every category, that may not reflect a buyer's actual opinions. This could have been done by eBay's default system. So having said this, I hope you understand, feedback is not a foolproof system. People will sometimes leave better feedback than they are inclined if they feel somehow it's in their best interest to do so. They don't want to antagonize the seller. They will sometimes leave worse feedback if they got annoyed by something. Might not actually reflect the transaction, might just reflect their annoyance. The DSRs, the stars, detailed seller ratings, might have been filled in by eBay and not the buyers. So it's important to keep all of this in mind, because as a seller on eBay, you want the highest rating you can get. Not everybody is going to look at it, but some people are. And having a lower rating could hurt you with some buyers. You absolutely do not want that. Okay, so that's our overview of feedback. Now, before we go, remember very quickly, the bonfire campaign is still going on. I'm going to show you the t-shirts and show you the URL you can go to get them. We need to hear from Hope Walker and ShinyShinyThings, our recent giveaway winners. So, take care. I will see you all next week.